Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Harriet once again, and we are into the second part of our webinar. With me, I have Hiba and Huma, who are think tank fellows, class 17, and they will be telling us more about who the think tank fellows are, what are the roles, and several details about the presentation. So it's going to be as smooth as it can. So Huma and Hiba, just give a very brief introduction of yourselves and what you will be presenting, and we can get started.
Hi guys. Harriet, can everybody hear me? Because I'm getting these comments that say people cannot hear or see anything.
Yes, they can now. Yes. Huma, those were the first comments before we hit broadcast. So now you're good to go.
Okay. All right. So hi guys. I am Huma and you know me. Hiba is not here. She'll be connecting with us from her office. So I'm not really going to talk about Think Tank Links Fellows or Think Tank, the fellowship. I'm going to be talking about think tanks, role of think tanks in the world, but particularly think tanks in America. And then later on, Hiba will join in to talk a little about role of think tanks in the Middle East, particularly Tunisia. But she'll give you an overview of what think tanks actually do in the Middle East. So basically, before I start, I just want to give you like a sort of a disclaimer. I don't have a presentation. I'm just going to be talking about what I think tanks are, my understanding of what think tanks are designed to do, and what they hold on. Hello.
Huma, you're doing good. Just continue. They are able to hear you.
Okay, so basically I'll be talking about role of think tanks, what they are designed to do around the world, how they get funding, and if they have any sort of actual influence in the world, in what they hope to do. So basically what a think tank basically is that they are public policy research institutes that conduct research and analysis, and basically they're targeting not the public, but the government organizations or the Congress in case of America. I won't be talking about European think tanks because they're very difficult to understand. They're funded by the governments or political parties, but in America usually think tanks are not funded by political parties or the government. They're independent, they're non-profit. They do have, and then I will talk about what their inclinations are. So a lot of them, most of them are, they do have political leanings, and they have ideological as well as philosophical and as well as a political way of looking at the world. And what they do is that they convert ideas into policy issues, and then they address them categorically. So yes, so I already talked about what they do. They conduct research. They're a non-profit organization that conduct research analysis, and then they advise governments on how to proceed on certain issues. They're independent from governments and political parties, etc. One of the basic idea behind think tanks is that you take an ideological view of the world, and then you bring it forward into policy, and then you make the government, or a better word would be advocate your point of view in terms of how policy should be designed, and that's what think tanks overall do. So in terms of advocacy, I don't know if you guys know a lot of that, what advocacy actually is. Advocacy is basically raising awareness And so it's very different from lobbying, and I want to be very politically correct about it. I don't want to say they lobby. They're not lobby groups. They advocate a certain idea and certain issues that they feel very strongly about. And in America, it's most think tanks are actually divided along political leanings. So there are conservatives, and then in the middle there are libertarians, and then there are liberals. So I mean, just to give you like a very brief definition of what these terms actually mean, conservatives are actually they believe in limited government, so as little government as possible. For them, they believe in economic freedom, so they think that government should not regulate a lot of things. So they're very open. They want open markets, they want open investment, they think that trade should be free. So these are all the things that they believe in economically. And then in socially, they're very closed up. They believe in let's say abortion, they're very anti-abortion and gay marriage, etc. So in the middle is, so I'll talk about liberals first. Liberals are like completely the opposite end of the spectrum. They think that they think that government should intervene in certain economic aspects. But they're, of course, they're very open about, they think that individual freedom should exist for in social issues, so abortion and gay rights. They're very strongly advocates of those issues. And in the middle, of course, in the middle are libertarians who are fiscally conservative. And I know most of you guys are not libertarians, but if you want to have a larger conversation with me about it, I could talk a little about that later on. Libertarians are fiscally conservative, but they're so they believe in limited government. They believe that the government should not intervene in a lot of issues, but in terms of social aspects, they are very open. So they would say, hey, if you want to live your life the way you want, if you want to marry your girlfriend, if you're a girl, so that's fine. I mean, they believe in that. So they're in the middle of it. And then there are other levels of political leanings that we have. And so what think tanks actually do is that most think tanks, I'm not saying all of them, I'm saying most think tanks actually have some sort of political leaning, and then they have these ideas of the world and how the world should be, and then they convert them into policy issues. And then they advocate those issues onto government and onto the legislators on how the government should redesign or change policies. So, and how do they do that? They do that with they do a lot of research, but some of the think tanks are academic in nature, but some of them are not. Most of the work that they do is research. So they do a lot of research. They have an idea, and then they do research on that. They support it with a lot of argument. There's a lot of statistical work that's going on. So they employ a lot of economists and scholars, academics as well. But also experts in the field, so experts in issues such as economics, health, what else? A lot of issues, all kinds of social and economic issues. So, and then they convert them into issue briefs, they convert them into backgrounders, they convert them into policy papers, and then these papers are strongly, very, very heavily advocated into to policymakers by publishing them, by meeting with them, by holding some sort of events or conferences. There's a lot of marketing, and I think there's a lot of advocacy is basically what their end goal is. Not end goal, pre-end goal is. So let's talk about a lot about this. So like I said earlier, so there are most of these think tanks in America are not are independent, and they're not supported by the governments or political parties. But some of them actually do, but they do have political leanings. So I mean, how do they handle that? How do they balance that that dichotomy? So hold on. So then what happens is that they're all classified into different types of think tanks. So the first type is an academic think tank. Should I continue, or I don't know if there's some real static? Hello?
Yeah, I think I've joined the conversation, so I'll go.
Harriet?
I think you can continue. I just joined the conversation.
Okay.
That's why it's
okay. You turn down your microphone. Please.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so then these think tanks are basically classified into different types of think tanks. So the first is academic. There are academic think tanks who are basically part of some universities or some institutions, and then they're sort of like very they're like, we are very academic in nature. So they strongly they sort of advocate their credibility and their influence of the academic community with scholars and scholarly research, and most of them most of them are PhDs or academics. They're very also, hold on, and some of these institutes, you might have heard of them. Number one is the Brookings Institute. It's an academic institute. And then the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank, but also academic in nature. Then there is the CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies. That is also, I think it's a progressive liberal think tank, central left think tank, but academic in nature. And then we have academic specialized think tanks. These institutions are basically, they don't look at everything. They don't look at domestic policy and foreign policy and everything. They look at a specific area or specific issue that they feel very strongly about. I think National Bureau of Economic Research is one of them. Julia O is our class 17 fellow. She's serving there. So they look at like different they specialize in one issue, and then they have a research agenda for that issue particularly, and then they advocate that issue. So next line is like yeah, and then there are these think tanks who actually do contract consulting for the governments. So I mean, I just want to say they're not supported by they're not funded by the government, but then they do. Their idea is to do research and analysis for government agencies, and they're on contractual basis. The government sort of hires, puts them on contract to do research for them, to come up with policy recommendations for them. And in the end, before I end and before Heba starts, I would give you an example of a very recent, very interesting bill that was passed, and then I'll tell you how a think tank would do, what a think tank would do in.
Hi, Huma, you just froze. Are you still there? Hiba, I think we lost Huma, she just froze, so if you could kindly just continue from where she stopped.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, you can start now. We lost Huma. I think her computer froze.
Okay. Okay. So everyone was. I'm Huma Sattar from Tunisia, Atlas Corp Fellow from Tunisia, and since we came, everyone is asking us about what does mean a think tank? What's their roles? Their role in the Middle East and North Africa? Like how do they work? We are in like. I'm now exposing the role of the think tanks in the Middle East, which is not very far from the roles in Asia. So research think tanks are now relatively a new phenomenon, and it's a new phenomenon in the Middle East and North Africa. And non-democratic regimes and the restriction on freedom of expression did not facilitate the transmission of thoughts and ideas in Arab countries in general. So, for example, the Arab Institute of Business Leaders, where I've been working in Tunisia, is considered one of the oldest think tanks in Tunisia and North Africa, and it has only been in operation since 1984. So just to put things into perspective and to compare with US and European think tanks. So according to an article of the Washington Institute, it appeared in 1996, I think, and it shows the level of social and political and strategic research in the Arab region, which is very poor in terms of numbers of researchers. Like we have there were no more than 5,000 researchers in the whole Arab world, and with 2,000 of whom published regularly, working in a total of, I think, 85 institutions covering all domestic and international issues. And this is what makes them different from US and European think tanks. Another thing is that they are also unfamiliar with the culture of lobbying and what we call advocacy, consultancies, and that have become commonplace for think tanks in other parts of the world. So on their independence, many people blame Arab think tanks for not being independent. And this is not totally wrong, because if you see the total financing for Arab think tanks, it's only $15 million per year, and $5 million are from the Arab world, and $10 million come from US, European, and Japanese sources. So I think this restrict the function of the institution to a large degree. Now, what made them like what helped a lot and what played a massive role in developing the research institution is the peace process, or what's so-called the Arab Spring. After the Arab Spring, many academics who were once silenced and muted and were unable to engage in policymaking process, or were unable to write or publish their research, are today creating research groups and involving themselves in the policy making and the decision making process. So especially like when it comes to freedom of expression, there's only, I think, 2 exceptions in the Arab world just Lebanon and Tunisia, who are allowing some kind of freedom of expression. There were in Tunisia an increasing number of civil society organizations and think tanks in offering an opportunity for those who were, like I said, for those who have really been heard to express their opinions and to have a voice and the policy debates. So I said, like, they are starting to contribute and fostering political and economic awareness and help governments to address political and economic issues and social challenges. So apart from the Arab Spring or the Tunisian Revolution, there were other factors that contributed to the development of think tanks in Tunisia or in the MENA region. One of them is the connection with the United States, where many think tanks were looking for counterparts in the Middle East and North Africa to collaborate with. So it has created the need for Arabs to spawn their own centers to interact with these organizations. Another factor is that the Arab governments, some Arab governments, are trying to learn from the past, from what happened in the revolutions, and they are trying to recognize the need for research organizations and have increased the demand for their work. So what they are doing is actually they provide expert views on a set of policy proposals of reforms introduced by the regimes in place, but they did not necessarily contribute to policy formulations. First, they have changed the way Arab leaders and thinkers conceive of politics and policy. And second, I think they evaluate in terms of options. They evaluate policy in terms of options associated with particular costs and benefits. So in general, they don't play a significant role in either making policy decisions or even just formulating policy options. Nevertheless, they are still capable of having an impact, and sometimes the government in some countries are open to fresh ideas and analysis offered by think tanks, experts, but frequently they are not. They are only interested in work that supports their agendas, their own agendas, and this is mostly a function of the personality of the leadership in place. So in terms of constraints faced by think tanks in the MENA region, I think one is the lack of freedom of expression. And in most Arab countries, they cannot express freely their opinions, even though it's economic opinions. Again, with some exception in Lebanon and Tunisia. So that affects a lot the research and the quality of research and recommendations. And another constraint is that the fact that there is a lot of foreign funds present new problems for maintaining independent integrity, since they don't receive a lot of money from their governments, so it makes them more dependent to their foreign donors. I think one of the other constraints is that Arab think tanks are not as powerful as and influential as their U.S., European counterparts, and they have relatively limited resources, a smaller number of scholars, and that restricted means to promote their informal channels to promote their work and to advocate for their reforms and to influence decision makers. And last but not least, lack of expertise and know-how in policy-oriented research is definitely impeding the quality of research in the Middle East and North Africa, and affect access to the information and is impeding their activities. So that's all. I think this is a brief overview about the think tanks and their roles in the Middle East and North Africa, and feel free to ask any questions. Huma?
Yeah.
I think I'm done. Do you have any questions?
Okay, so I just like to wrap things up. This was like a 30-minute presentation. I don't think we can actually fit in what think tanks are, what their roles are around the world, in the US and in the Middle East. Minutes, especially when I was cut off for a little while. But then, we can always talk about it. You can have whatever questions you have about think tanks, even if we did not discuss it. And I know we just sort of reviewed the whole thing. Send them to us. We can respond. And that's it. I wanted to give you an example of the latest bill that Indiana passed about religious freedom and LGBT discrimination. But since we don't have time, I don't think we can do that. So if you have any questions, just send them to us, and we would try to respond.
Well, thank you so much, Huma and Hiba. If you could just check the Q&A to be sure that we don't have any questions. In case we don't have any questions, I'll request that you share with me your presentation, and you can also include any links that you think are relevant to us, so that we can have some private readings, and whoever has questions can to you.
I actually have a few readings that that would be very interesting for anybody who's actually interested in the subject. So I'll send them to you, but I don't have a presentation.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Bye.
So thank you so much, Huma. Thank you, Hiba, and thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It's been great having you around for this hour, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you, and have a good day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.